Is there, besides going to the bathroom, going number two, and sweating, is there anything else that people could use in order to get rid of those persisting toxic pollutants?
Yeah, this is where it gets a little bit controversial, but one of the most, and you probably as a resident, in medical school talked about this, N-acetylcysteine or NAC. It's a precursor to what's known as glutathione. And this is a very important antioxidant as well as detoxification molecule in the body. It's naturally made by your liver and other cells. It's readily available throughout, or it should be in your bodily tissues. And this can help to detoxify some of these persistent organic pollutants. So this is a naturally occurring amino acid that's found in food products, mainly animal products and so forth. But when you take the amino acid N-acetylcysteine or NAC along with glycine, again, another amino acid that's found in nature, when you take these things together, that can improve detoxification mechanisms as well as antioxidant function in the body. So that's another thing. Then there's other compounds that are a little bit more speculative, such as milk thistle. There's a lot of herbs that can sort of enhance what's known as phase 2 detoxification. Those things I think are helpful, but I like NAC and glycine because it's been used in mainstream medicine for Tylenol toxicity for several decades now. And so we know it's very effective. You mentioned a point that I did want to mention because I was in Mexico City and I noticed the air quality was quite poor. Air quality can actually be another source of persistent organic pollutant exposure, diesel fume exhaust from big trucks and so on. So if you live in an area where there's a lot of cars, it's highly dense, maybe Mexico City, Bogota, et cetera, you may want to consider when you exercise. Like we talked about the importance of exercise, but if you go for a run at 5 o'clock when everyone's on the road, you could be inhaling some of these compounds as well. So try to go to the mountains if you have the ability to do that, or walk during the middle part of the day when there's not as much traffic. So I did want to mention that traffic exposure, air pollution could potentially be another source of these compounds.
How do you feel about when people say that chemicals have nothing to do with our health? I see people, and I've seen accounts growing like foam, getting a lot of attention, making fun, saying, "Oh, come on, don't come with this. Now you're telling me that these chemicals." Show me a study where they took 400,000 people and they exposed people to this, and what were the problems or what were the health issues related with this. And I stop and say, what about cigarettes? We have something in history where we recommended as physicians people to smoke. We encouraged them to say, go, smoke this. This is very good for your health. Even this brand, it's even better because it's toasted, so it's better for your throat.
Winston tastes real good, rich and full like a cigarette should. Brings real flavor back to you. Try a pack of Winston.
And show me if there's one study on the effects of cigarettes in humans. There's none. Why? If someone tried to do it, it would go to jail. It's
big business.
But when I think of these people saying like, ooh, chemicals, I'm like, really? Really? Is my body made for being exposed to things that should be underneath the ground coming from petroleum? And what does it happen when these chemicals are mixed with my metabolic problems, with the altering issues in my microbiota, with my stress, with the excess of white light, and everything combined? You get this, you put it in a blender. Well, that looks like a lot to most of the diseases that we see right now. What do you think about this?
Yeah, Carlos, this is a phenomenal question. I think it has to do with an outdated model of toxicology. So the field of speaking of heavy metal exposure or these plastic containing compounds, the endocrine disrupting chemicals, phthalates, dioxins, PCBs, and all of this, the field of toxicology used to say the dose makes the poison. And so, but that is, we know to be outdated. So we're not talking about mercury toxicity that's at lethal levels. We're talking about exposure to these compounds in small levels. And the thing about persistent organic pollutants, or these chemicals that we're referring to, they have what's known as nonlinear pharmacokinetics. So let's just say, for example, pharmacokinetics is a study of how metabolites are metabolized through the body. If I give myself testosterone, it's going to occur. I'm going to have blood levels increasing in a linear fashion. The more testosterone I inject, the more that's going to show up in my blood, the more muscle I might build. Also, I might get more angry. I might lose hair, all the things that environmental toxins adhere to what's known as nonlinear pharmacokinetics. Sometimes a small dose can increase blood levels, and then it can kind of do these. And there's all these papers from the Endocrine Society that have been published about this. And so it's a new way of thinking, because what happens, when we're exposed to lead or mercury or testosterone, we start to store these compounds, and they're, say, bound to what's known as sex hormone binding globulin. So one way the body can help to decrease testosterone in that case, if I were to take a lot of it, is it can say, hey, Mike's testosterone is too high. We're going to take this hormone known as sex hormone binding globulin and bind it up to protect the body. We can also, the testosterone and other compounds can bind to blood albumin, the proteins in our blood or our serum. The problem with these persistent organic is they do not bind to sex hormone binding globulin. They do not bind to albumin. They exist in the free state where they can adhere to and latch onto our own hormonal receptors. For example, the estrogen receptor. Many of the phthalates and the plastic-containing compounds actually directly bind to or augment estrogen-related signaling, and that can lead to water retention, weight gain, and also accelerate estrogen-related cancers like breast cancer, prostate cancer, uterine cancer, which are all on the rise, by the way. So that's what I say to that is it's an outdated model of toxicology. It's not that the dose makes the poison. And the other thing about toxicology studies, they'll give a rat, say, several doses of just one compound. Let's say it's lead or mercury, but they're not looking at, as you mentioned, the synergistic effects. We're exposed to lead, mercury, arsenic, atrazine, glyphosate. I was just doing some research from our own USDA, which is the Department of Agriculture here in the US. On corn alone, there's 1,300 different fungicides, insecticides, and herbicides that are used just on corn. In the US, there's, if you look at the state of Texas, there's I think 10% of the U.S. Soil, fertile, plantable soil is just corn, and we're spraying millions of pounds of fungicides, insecticides, and herbicides, and all of these compounds actually impact our body's mitochondria, and that's how they kill the bugs. That's how they kill, fungus and bacteria and so forth in the soil that would harm the corn growing. And so we're spraying millions of pounds of chemicals on corn, on soy, on peanuts, and this is what people are eating. So we're consuming it in all these different areas. And you mentioned the person who's seemingly doing everything right from a diet standpoint, yet the foods that they could be eating could be enriched in mitochondrial poisons. And that's why they're unable to burn the fat, because it turns out, where do you burn fat? It's actually within your mitochondria, which about 10% of your body weight is comprised of this little specialized organ within your cells known as mitochondria. So that's what I would say to that. It's an outdated model of toxicology, and we're not considering the synergistic effects of these compounds. Several studies have found that people that don't eat organic fruits and vegetables have high serum levels of organophosphates, which are, again, a compound used in agriculture to prevent herbivory, to make the plants thrive. But when we eat it, it harms our health. And you mentioned the microbiome as well as our human cells. So for those folks that are like, I can't lose the weight, make sure that your fruits and your vegetables are organic, because they're going to be lower in organophosphates.
And it's not something to ridiculize and to say that you should be like living in a cave and being extremely anxious and obsessed with all of this. But it doesn't mean also that you need to ignore what's going on with this.